Good morning, everyone. I'm Ann Minicozy. I'm the founder, owner, and event facilitator of the Community Breakfast of the Main Line, Undoing Racism Day, Embracing the Difference. I work on this with a whole lot of people, a large steering committee, and if the people who are here in the room at this moment on the steering committee could just stand up and be acknowledged for a second. Give them a round of applause for working on it. Thank you. On behalf of Villanova University President Father Peter Donahue, I welcome you to the 2017 Community Breakfast. 12 hours ago, in this very room, Eboo Patel was here regarding his book, Acts of Faith, which is the one book Villanova selection for this year, where all of the first-year students and indeed all of the campus faculty, staff, and students are welcomed as a community to read this book, Acts of Faith, this year. So 12 hours ago, Eboo Patel was standing up on this dais and talking to us about the book and about interfaith cooperation. And one of the things that he said is, he said, I don't know how we will get to the point of having interfaith cooperation, but I know who will work on it. And he looked at all of the people in the room and all of the students, especially here at the university, and encouraged that we can create new stories. We are new narrators of new stories. And so each of us in this room for the community breakfast is a new narrator of a new story. And I would propose that one of the stories that we are telling by being here today is answering the question, how do we become a beloved community? And so that's something to think about that I wanted to share from last night, is how we are new narrators of new stories. This morning we'll have the color guard, and it will be Radnor and Lower Merion Township Police together. After that, Phil R., who is the president of Radnor Township Board of Commissioners, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And then Jazara Morales will sing the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And I believe we can join in on the chorus, and the words to the song are in the program. I just want to give a special thanks to Diana Robertson, who's the president of the Mainline branch of the NAACP. Diana, could you just stand up for a second? Diana's on the steering committee of the Community Breakfast, and also as president of the NAACP, she coordinated this program and the panel and the panelists. So a great amount of thanks for Diana. I'm going to turn it over to the color guard, who will be proceeding into the room now. Thank you.
We ask the audience to please stand up as the honor guard presents the college.
Please remain standing and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He has loosed the faithful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. I have seen him in the watchfires of 100 circling camps. They have builded him an altar in the evening and the damps. I can read his righteous sentence in the dim and flaring lamps. His day is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. Thank you.
Does everybody just remain standing while they're retired at college?
Detail, right, peace. March.
You can be seated now.
We had a plan that everyone would be able to go to the buffet as they came in, but given the time, what we'll do is proceed table by table and do it that way, so that you're all not standing back there, and we'll proceed with the program. Thanks. Tables 3 and 4 can proceed to the buffet. Table 5 can proceed to the buffet.
see. Okay. You sit in the middle. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Hi,
Good to meet you, Candace.
Nice to meet you.
I'm gonna sit right.
Okay. Oh yeah, I meant to. I'm fine. I don't know what I did. You have.
Ready for it?
I meant to do it.
Yeah. So, are you the new graduate? New college grad? Or?
No.
No. I wasn't sure. I gotta read your bio. Oh, okay.
Good morning. I know everybody's eating, but good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started because we really want to be able to engage our panelists and you, the audience. We have one of our panelists is on the way, so hopefully by the time we get into it good, she'll be here. But I am very happy to present our expert panelists this morning. We have here right now, we have Dr. Candace Robertson-James, Assistant Professor and Director of the Master of Public Health Program at LaSalle University. And we have Councilman Hakeem Jones, who is Councilman for the 4th District in Norristown. And as soon as she arrives, we will have Kiera Bradford Gray, Esquire Chief Defender of the Philadelphia Defender Association. As the panelists provide valuable information for all to engage in the conversation, you will find 3x5 cards on your table. And so as you're listening and questions come to mind, please take time to write them down, and someone will come around to retrieve them. We're looking forward to an in-depth conversation designed to engage you, the audience. Okay, so let us begin. I'm going to ask our panelists, beginning with Dr. Robertson-James, to provide an opening statement which includes a little information about yourself and a little on your personal journey as to how you arrived where you are today.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of such a wonderful program. So, as was introduced, I'm an assistant professor and the director of the Master of Public Health program at LaSalle University currently. My background is in public health. And so what does that mean exactly? Most of the times when I say I work in public health, I kind of get that blank stare that goes, oh, okay. People are not quite sure of what exactly that means. And so public health is a really large field, and it encompasses lots of different things. And so that's in part why most people don't have a clear conception of what exactly it is. But when we say public health, we're really, very broadly talking about the provision of the conditions that help people to be healthy. And so that incorporates lots of different systems, lots of different perspectives. And so public health is this mixture of individual responsibility with collective action. So we have a right and responsibility to be healthy. We have to do certain things. We have to eat a certain way. We have to get a certain amount of activity, et cetera, to be healthy. But it also acknowledges that we alone don't have the full responsibility over our health, right? There's collective action that has to happen in order for us to be healthy. And so without laws and policies that govern our clean air and clean water and our sanitation and our traffic laws, et cetera, that those things are equally important, our education, our housing, our labor, et cetera. And so that there is this balance between our individual responsibility and our collective action. My work has been a lot in the area of health disparities, and so a lot of times in public health we think about, well, why don't we have equal health outcomes for everybody? I mean, we live in a great country, we have access to an amazing science and medicine, but we don't have those same experiences. And so health differences are things like we have a higher amount of cervical cancer in women compared to men. Well, we can kind of explain that physiologically, right? That makes sense, right? So that's a health difference. But it's an explainable and perfectly good health difference, right? That's fine. But health disparities says that there's a difference that is occurring as a result of an inequity, right? That there's a difference that occurs as a result of a social injustice. And so it's not just a difference like the cervical cancer in women compared to men, but it's a difference that we should not expect to see. It's a difference that we find that's rooted in our social systems. And so that's what I spend a lot of my time doing, working with a variety of different types of communities to hopefully improve health disparities and really promote equity.
Thank you. Councilman Jones.
Hi, good morning, everybody. First, just want to thank the NAACP Mainline Branch for hosting this great event. It is good to see local law enforcement. I see some educators. I see some students and just community folks in general. It's a pleasure being here this morning. I'll basically start. I'm a Norristown native, born and raised. Grew up, went through all the Norristown area school district schools. But what I can say, which played a big difference in allowing me to become the person that I am today, I could first say exposure was the number one thing as far as not just staying in Norristown, but having the ability to go other places. It's kind of ironic that I'm here in the Bryn Mawr area. I had two young friends growing up in my neighborhood whose parents went through, unfortunately a divorce, and I spent many of my summers down here in the Bryn Mawr area. So just that experience alone opened my eyes, coming from Norristown, of the large houses and the driveways and all the good things in life. So I think exposure really, at a young age for students, you really got to put yourself in a position where you can see what you want in life. Outside of my full-time job as a truancy officer with the Norristown Area School District, so I spend a lot of time working with youth. I spend a lot of time working with families. And my background on the pamphlet, I have a degree in public relations journalism. But what really benefited me in that area is that, I've had the ability to communicate and work with people from all walks of life. I spent my earlier career helping welfare to work recipients return to employment, helping non-custodial child support parents avoid incarceration by helping them find jobs. And it wasn't long after that I was able to work with the Montgomery County Workforce Investment Board to serve at-risk youth throughout the county. So I spent many years in my early career in and out of the schools, working with the special ed departments, working with the community groups, many times even in Lower Merion and Harriton. So I was blessed to be able to have a wide variety of exposure at a young age that kind of set me up for where I'm at now as a councilman. Public service is a challenging feat. We see it every day. We don't always get the best reputations. We don't always get looked at as trustworthy individuals. But I've always tried to surround myself with mentors and positive people that will allow me to do the right thing. So all those things have kind of combined to give me the platform to run for an elected official in my hometown. So there's a notion that if you don't keep yourself busy, if you don't stay involved, if you don't play sports or get involved, then you're going to be stuck in Norristown. And it's pretty true for a lot of people, now that I'm coming through as an adult. However, I'm still stuck in Norristown. So, but yeah, I'm glad to be here today, and I look forward to the questions and conversation.
Thank you. In his position as the first African-American Associate Supreme Court Justice, Thurgood Marshall spoke in 1987 as part of the Constitutional Bicentennial Celebration. His remarks included the following quote: "I do not find the wisdom, foresight, and sense of justice exhibited by the framers particularly profound. To the contrary, the government they devised was defective from the start, requiring several amendments, a civil war, and momentous social transformation to attain the system of constitutional government and its respect for the individual freedoms and human rights we hold as fundamental today. When contemporary Americans cite the Constitution, they invoke a concept that is vastly different from what the framers barely began to construct 2 centuries ago. So just before this document in 1776, the Declaration of Independence spoke to unalienable rights, which are considered to be life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. How do you believe the Constitution compromises our unalienable rights regarding health, Candace, and government? Hakeem.
Well, I think there's a few things. I think, one of the things that we obviously as a nation have been continuing to grapple with over the last several years is this concept of a right to health versus a privilege to health. And some people argue that there is no right to health overtly described in the Constitution, right? There is no amendment that says you have the right to health. In part because health is a large concept, so you can't necessarily say you have a right to health without saying you have a right to everything that would help you to be healthy, right? A right to health would mean requiring a right to a standard of education, a right to a standard of housing, a right to a standard of employment, all those things, safety in communities, absence of community violence, a whole host of things. And so as a health, as such a social, physical, mental, financial, spiritual concept, as such, it would be, in part kind of impossible to legislate at a very specific level. But right, we have these concepts in the Constitution that talk about the role of government in the provision of the welfare of people, right? And so what does welfare mean for a lot of people? It means health, right? We have descriptions in the Constitution that says that we do have inalienable rights and that life is part of that, right? We have that the part of the role of government is to establish life and liberty and property, right? And that there should not be discrimination amongst those things. And so when we think about health, and we think, yes, there's not like a very specific clause or amendment in the Constitution that says that, and a lot of people get stuck on that and say, okay, well, we don't have an obligation, we don't have a responsibility to provide these things to our population, but it is woven in, right, in those types of concepts and words. And so we have kind of been stuck as the country as to which perspective we, believe, which perspective we buy into. Life for many means health, right? You can't have life without health. Life is embodying all these things, right? To provide for the life and liberty of individuals is to provide for their health and their welfare. In order to do that, we have to think about all those things that lead into their health. I think where it has compromised or been compromised is that we talk about institutionalized discrimination, institutionalized racism, and lots of other isms and inequalities, and we talk about that they're woven into the fabric of our institutions. So it's not, it's a problem when individuals exhibit bias and inequalities and prejudice against individuals. That's a problem. But sometimes we don't really acknowledge that these things are woven into our systems, our institutions, were framed in the sense of inequality and who these documents were written for and who they were not written for. When we think about Plessy versus Ferguson, what did that do, right? It legalized racial segregation in this country. And so as a product, it legalized racism, right? It was a system of racial policies in education, in healthcare, in criminal justice, in labor, in every institution in our society. It legalized these things. And so we have not just about 60 years since that time. And so it's important to recognize that these things are still woven into our systems, how we operate. And I'll say more later, but that these things are just woven into our systems. So when we say institutionalized inequality, we have to understand that these things were legislated, that inequalities were a part of the framework of many of our institutions.
Thank you.
Could you touch on that question briefly?
Okay, so how do you believe the Constitution compromises our unalienable rights regarding government?
In terms of government, government's very challenging. Being a young elected official, being a minority, person of color, when you see, government, it doesn't always reflect, the communities in which they're serving. As you're coming up in school, you're not always, pushed, to be, a senator or, a councilman or a state rep. I do think now that I'm in the process, I do see a tremendous opportunity to change that. I think the Constitution was set during a time where there were no people of color included in the conversation. So in some cases, maybe they didn't expect at some point that there would be people of color or minorities in the conversation. So I do think as an elected official, a new minority elected official, we have to, continue to push the idea that, there are positive careers in public service. There are opportunities to change your communities. There are opportunities to, serve and make your council body or your school board reflect the community that it serves. It is a fair, equal process. Voting is and should be a fair, equal process. It's not always portrayed, and it's not always, there's other sides who try to manipulate that, but I think the Constitution is set in a certain way that everyone should benefit from it, and everyone should fight to benefit from it, even when there's folks who don't want you to. So just in my short 2-year career as an elected official, I do have a passion to educate young folks and minorities and women and different people who may have wanted to lead but just didn't know how. If it hadn't been for mentors and folks who've come before me, I probably would have chickened out and said, look, this isn't for me. I don't want the responsibility. I don't think I can do it. But I do think the Constitution allows all of us to sit in these positions and serve our communities.
Thank you. We are happy to have our Chief Defender of Philadelphia join us, and so that you can catch up. What I asked them initially was to provide a little information about yourself and just to give us a little bit of information as to your personal journey on how you are where you are today.
Well, I'll do a brief version because I am late. So I apologize for that, but thank you so much for having me. I really am honored to be here today. My name is Kira Bradford Gray, and I'm the Chief Defender of the Defender Association of Philadelphia. And what we do is we represent people who are charged with a crime who cannot afford an attorney, but we also represent children who have been deemed to be abused and neglected. So having those two facets in our office gives us a lot of information about how cyclical some of these issues are and how people who were born into poverty-stricken types of situations really do cycle themselves into our criminal justice system for the most part. My journey was really simple. My passion is just a servant, and I never thought that being a defense attorney, I'd be considered a servant. So I went to law school because I wanted to be a trial lawyer, and I went to the Defender Association of Philadelphia because I thought they had the best trial practice in the world. But when I got there, I found out it was much more than just trial. What they were really doing was social justice advocacy. And I loved it. And so it really aligned with who I was. And I took that opportunity to serve in the capacity of a lawyer because I always admired lawyers who were the catalyst for social change. And I love looking at the history books and looking at the lawyers who were responsible for the Plessy versus Ferguson, the lawyers who were responsible for a lot of the other areas that we see now with respect to integration of schools. We still have ways to go, but just the fact that there was lawyers began this social change. I love that. Lawyers and, of course, the political will of the people. So I just wanted to stay in this area, in this realm, and say, how could I use my degree to make sure that I am a catalyst of social change? And I believe that that's the mission that I have brought to my office. I was, before the Defender Association of Philadelphia, I was the Chief Defender of Montgomery County. And we brought that understanding of community and justice system, how together we can make things better and make a bigger impact on the people that were adversely affected by the criminal justice system.
Great. And Kiera, so how do you believe the Constitution compromises our unalienable rights regarding criminal justice?
So it's interesting, right? The Constitution is what we fight to protect all the time. And, you know, for me, I am always happy that I live in a place where I have constitutional rights. But when we look at what happens to some people's constitutional rights, we have to understand where is the Constitution designed to protect and where does the Constitution allow for systemic oppression. So I look at certain rights that will never seem to go away no matter what public harm they cause, like the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment seems to stand strong no matter what types of destruction it has on communities, the violence and all of that. And no matter how many statistics you give, it just seems like you can't chip away at that. However, when you think about the Fourth Amendment, the right to be protected against unreasonable searches and seizures, you see the chipping away of that right in certain respects. You see it when you go into Philadelphia and they say, well, if this is a high crime area, your Fourth Amendment rights are extremely diminished. Well, unfortunately, people can't help when they live in poorer communities, but their Fourth Amendment rights are diminished routinely. They're routinely violated, and it's justified. So I see the dichotomy of when we exert constitutional rights to some groups and when we are justified chipping them away to others. And with the 13th Amendment, you know, to the Constitution, that's another area where it allows for involuntary servitude if you are charged with a crime. That is in the Constitution. And these are things that are designed and help keep systems that continuously leave people feeling like they are second-class citizens of our society.
All right, so the questions are starting to come in. Candace, how do you plan to counteract the present administration and their deregulation of public health regulation?
Thanks for the nice, easy question to start this off. Yeah, I mean, as soon as I do that, I will, solve world peace, and we will all be just happy and healthy and awesome. I think, obviously, the public health community is having lots of work to do, and, working hard to advocate for entities, for communities, and there are a tremendous number of public health issues that we are facing right now as a country. I mean, we're not searching for huge problems, right? Kiara just talked about, community violence, which continues to be a huge issue. We have the opioid epidemic, that is a huge issue, that are impacting lots of different people. We have the frequent flyers that I call them, the hypertension, the diabetes, all that hasn't gone away, by the way, also. And we have a fight and what, many have believed as an attack against the kind of public health structure and the public health system. And so, many of the public health community organizations and agencies are rallying together. They're advocating to think about, really kind of engaging with people. I think public health at its core is about partnership. There is no one entity who can do any of this alone. There's no one system. When we think about health, I think the greatest thing, sometimes people say, okay, health, I was talking the other day at a meeting with a group of, in academic setting, and they said, okay, so public health, and, we'll have the nurses, and, we'll have clinicians, and I'm like, no, we need criminal justice, we need education, we need social work, we need psychology, we need every entity. There's no one who we don't need at the table to say, how is this impacting you? We need to all come together to think about ways that we can protect and be the voice of every perspective in our community.
Okay. I think this one is for everyone. What would be your advice in encouraging more robust participation in public service, whether in health, law, or government, so that communities and their needs are more accurately reflected?
So I spent a lot of time on Facebook. I'm sure a lot of us do. And I see a lot of criticism, and I do see, I do see some complaining, but I also see people who are passionate about, their issues. They're passionate about their families. They're passionate about their jobs, their children. And there are a lot of folks who want to get involved, and then there's just folks who just don't know how. They don't know who to contact. They might not trust who to contact. I found it easy to reach out to, in my case, I've reached out to mentors and people I know that are doing good work in the community. I didn't make it so much about an organization, or I would reach out to the individuals that I've known of long time in your community who are present, at your council and school board meetings, people who are coordinating community days and community events. I think getting involved, it takes a lot. It's a lot of time away from your family, a lot of time away from your jobs and everything else, but you really just have to do it. Go to your council meetings, listen to what's being said, listen to the changes and the regulations that are being planned. Attend your school board meetings and figure out if it's something that you can do. Most municipalities have committees. They have, I know for a fact we have a public safety committee where you can be a citizen. You can be in a citizen leadership academy. You can be. We have a special events committee within our township who help with all the different events. There's tons of nonprofits in the area that can also connect you to people. So I would just say there's tons of resources out there and opportunities to get involved. It's just a matter of doing it and contacting the people you trust. I get calls all the time. How can I get involved? How can I, first thing I do is think of, who can I connect you to at the school? Who can I connect you to, at the Recovery Learning Center? Who can I connect you with at the mental health institution? So there's different areas that you just have to find your interests and then connect those key people.
One of the things I'd like to do, well, first, I'd like to acknowledge and recognize one of my good friends in this audience, Judge Carolyn Nichols, and I am so happy that she is here because she's one of those constitutional advocates as well, as she sits on the bench and decides these cases every day. So I wanted to make sure I did that. But two, I think as a public servant, it is our job. We live and breathe this stuff every day. And it is our job to do, like Hakeem said, go to these areas and listen and understand the types of issues that are plaguing certain communities and bring data and information to them that they can take and digest and say, hey, I can come up with a solution to my own problem if this is what's happening. I think oftentimes we don't spend enough time breaking it down in digestible bites, enough for people to say, I know how I can contribute to helping that problem. So that is what I try to do when I engage community, because and I didn't always have the right way to do it, because when I started out, I think I would overwhelm people with all the problems to the point where they were like, well, I can't do anything. If you can't do anything, I can't do anything. I started really understanding where are these issues coming from and who can I join with to say, I need your help, and together we can figure this out. And I think that's how you move the needle, because otherwise people don't know what to do. They want to do something, but they don't know what. And I'll give you an example. When we were looking at school-to-prison pipeline issues, and everyone said that word, school-to-prison pipeline, what is that? And it seemed like something that was very overwhelming but didn't have a real substantive or tangible way of dealing with it. We just started simply. We started looking at all the court cases that were coming from schools. We wanted to find out what school was more notorious for sending kids to, an officer or arresting kids. And if they were, we wanted to look at why. What are your policies regarding these arrests, these school arrests? Then we wanted to look at the demographic of the kid. What kinds of kids are you arresting more routinely? And once we had that information, we took it to the Human Relations Commission. Then we started getting, we got a meeting with the superintendent for the particular school that this was happening more frequently in Montgomery County. And with that, we came up with a solution for alternatives. And this is where we started the Norristown Youth Court, and where we use students and teachers to solve some of their own disciplinary infractions rather than sending it to me. It made better sense. It was better for the kid. It was better for the environment. It was better for the teacher. And everyone had, it's still going on now. I know Dean Beer, who's now the chief public defender in Montgomery County, is still keeping that going, and that's good. And Hakeem was involved in the beginning of this. But it is a way that we took a problem that was becoming more of a national crisis and said, hey, we want to solve this one step at a time. And I think I'm now learning, the older I get, that you're not going to solve all the problems of the world just because you want to, but I may be able to plant seeds that I may never see come to fruition, but hopefully they'll grow based on what I did in terms of using what I had in my purview and putting it into the right hands.
What you just said kind of segues into the next question, Kiera. How do you see defender office or work affecting the process of mass incarceration? Is there a way to interrupt the plea bargain catch-22?
Yeah. Good question. Who did that? Good question. So, you know, everything, I think, it doesn't happen with just lawyers. It does, community has to be involved. And so how do I see public defenders interrupting the process of mass incarceration? We're doing that on different levels. One, and everything, the beauty of it, everything started in Montgomery County with these discoveries. One, what we're doing is an initiative called participatory defense. That means that community participates in the outcomes they want to see. Oftentimes you see people marching for better justice or justice outcomes, and they march about policing, they stop at the front door of the criminal justice building, and then they pick back up when people get out of jail, which is called reentry. But everything that happens in that building, no one was there. No one understood how that perpetuated the cyclical things that we were seeing. So we decided to take our knowledge of the system to the community, teach them about our system, teach them what each hearing means, and teach them about the opportunities we have to get better humanizing information in front of a decision maker if we had more available to us. So we are using communities to help give us information that we wouldn't ordinarily get. I think people think as a lawyer we just know everything about, and I appreciate that people that think that we know everything, but we know everything about a person and their circumstances. But we're saying we don't. We know what we're given in terms of a paper of what the action was that we're deemed to defend. But do we know this person his life was filled with trauma? Do we know that this is how this person reacts when faced with a certain situation? Do we know that this person is the mother, the father, the person that works the 11 to 7 shift? Those things are very critical to being treated fairly and getting better outcomes so that people don't have to use jail as a first option. We can use community resources or community options to say we can deal with this behavior while teaching them a lesson. What I've seen in my career is that we've used jail as the first resort for a lot of circumstances that we don't see happening in more of the affluent communities. You know, and so I'm wondering, why is that different? Because I think people understand the value of a life when they come from a very well-to-do family or background, and they don't want to destroy those opportunities. But when you have people that we represent, those who live in poor communities and don't have a lot of support structures, people are more willing to put them in jail for fear that if I don't know what's going to happen because I don't know this person. I don't know their potential. So participatory defense is using communities to build up that understanding of who these people are so that alternatives to incarceration, where appropriate, where they are appropriate. I'm not saying that in every case incarceration is not necessary, but a lot of instances we don't have to use our jail system. We can use other alternatives so that we don't make people more desperate. That's one way. Another way is looking at the pretrial incarceration population. You know, we talk about how people are presumed innocent until proven guilty. Well, then why are people given bail that they can't afford and they sit in jail for 6 to 8 months while awaiting their day in court to say whether or not you're innocent or guilty? Those who can afford it don't have to do that. So we are looking and rallying a campaign around understanding how pretrial detention has really, really played a big part in mass incarceration. Because mass incarceration doesn't mean we don't use jail ever. It just means we're just putting everybody in jail and figuring it out later. And so we're going on a campaign for no money bail system. And we're looking at alternatives to dealing with behavior so that people can resume their jobs, resume their lives while fighting their case. And so those are two ways that we're using community to help us build the political will to do this, but also help us bring more humanizing information for the decision makers. Yeah. So there's one that's currently in Norristown. There's a Justice Hub, and it's community people, and Hakeem, you've seen it, and you can speak to it as well. Well, I'd love for Hakeem to speak on it from his perspective.
So I've volunteered on some occasions. CADCOM is Montgomery County Community Action Agency, is in partnership with the Montgomery County Public Defender's Office, and I do believe there's also some law students involved, if I'm not mistaken. Is it Villanova Law? Okay. So what happens is residents or community folks who may have been charged with a crime or they may be pending some type of case, it's really an opportunity for folks to educate those people while they're waiting. There's some things that the common person doesn't know about sentencing. There's basic laws and things that they need to be prepared for when it comes to, writing a statement or when it comes to going to your court hearing. Some rights that the common person doesn't know they have. There's an agency, Debug out of San Jose, California, I believe. They have a large-scale participatory defense program, and they came over to the East Coast to help Norristown and the Public Defender's Office launch that. So it's really a good, it doesn't guarantee that you may not get sentenced, but it is a good preparation stage for families who can take a very severe charge, and with the right outreach, the right documentation, you might help somebody go to the mental health organization to send in a diagnosis. So you might get the information you need that will allow the judge to sentence you in a proper way. So it does provide mentorship and guidance for people who are looking at tough situations.
Well, what they did is that they learned our system. So we put boxes of each of the hearings and what they mean. And then we put circles as to what you can do to help get the best outcomes for those hearings. Because I think people think this process is something that happens where, lawyers have the ability to research and understand every single person and their history. And that's unfortunately not the case. When we get a case, sometimes we hadn't even met the person. We only know what they are charged with. We have a few moments to talk with them to try to pull out all the information that we can, but that's not ideal. And the best way to get the ideal outcome is to use the people that care about them and that know them the most and put that information into our hands. So they go to a hub, they go to a meeting, say they're charged with a crime, and a family member goes to a meeting and says, hey, I don't know what to do. Well, the people have them write their names on the board and write what stage of the case they're at. If they're at the preliminary hearing stage, most people don't even know what that means, what that stands for. They explain what that means. They then tell them to do things like write down all the witness information that you can. Take pictures of the scene. Give me any information that you want the lawyer to know so that we can make sure that this judge knows that if they either give them a high bail, they're going to be in jail losing out on a job they just got. They're going to be in jail and they have severe medical conditions which may cause them to decompose. All of these factors that really don't make their way into those first hearings, which are really critical. We're trying to use community to help people understand what they need to gather and what information that needs to be readily available so that we can make that pitch for an alternative. It doesn't just go to sentencing. It goes to negotiations, too. When you're working with a prosecutor that has a bunch of charges that some may fit and some may not, you're going to try to use what you know about the person to negotiate something different so that the person doesn't have to have a felony at the age of 30 where they've never had a crime before, an arrest before. They can actually have something that allows them to resume their life and keep their job and keep things that, that are necessary for stability.
Okay, Candace, how do you think racism affects public health?
Well, I mean, racism is, like I said, really a part of our fabric of our society, so it greatly affects public health. Last year, Dr. Kamara Jones actually, as part of the American Association of Public Health, launched a national campaign against racism. So that's how important, they saw it as the president of APHA at that time. And so there's been lots of initiatives really looking at the role of racism in public health. There is a tremendous amount of research that shows the specific pathways by which racism influences health outcomes and health disparities on the individual and the collective level. And so from stress outcomes, from trauma, from decision making, from lots of different things. And then the institutionalized pathways. And so we know there was a research a number of years ago called the ACEs studies, the Adverse Childhood Experiences studies, that happened a long time ago. For some reason, we're just getting like the red light now, like, oh, that makes sense. Children who are exposed to adverse outcomes actually have poor outcomes when they become adults. And so, that we needed a lot of research to show us this. And now it's being replicated across the country in a variety of different cities, including Philadelphia and surrounding areas. And we're beginning to see, again, those pathways. And I think, in the APHA and Dr. Kamara Jones has laid this wonderful framework, because a lot of times when people hear the word racism, they go to like an individual level thing, like I'm not a bad person, I'm a good person, I love everybody, and that's awesome. Like we all love everybody, hopefully. But the thing is that it's in our systems. And so you can go to work every day a wonderful person and still be a part of a system that was built to oppress certain individuals. And if we don't acknowledge that system, we'll continue to say, but I'm a good person, but you're a good person, but how are these things still playing out in our systems? And so I talked about Plessy versus Ferguson earlier, but there's ways that we still embrace a separate but equal mentality in our society. We can go to one school district and it looks very different than another school district. Why is that? We go to one community with 10 awesome grocery stores and another community with 0 grocery stores, and we're okay with that. We're okay with those separations. We're okay with those differences, and then say, why don't those people do X, Y, and Z, but we don't acknowledge the oppression that what they're dealing with, the trauma, and genetically how that is influencing people. So now we're learning with epigenetics that actually what we thought was just a gene, turn on or turn off, that our environment plays a role in turning those genes on or off. So when we look at these issues and health issues that we long for, said, well, these people, there must be something physiological or biological going on here for them to have high rates of hypertension, heart disease, all these things. Now we're saying, it's not so much that there's a genetic difference. The genetic difference we thought we were seeing is as a result of the environment that they're over generations exposed to, and that environment has actually contributed to changing their physiology. So there's ways that we have got to begin to come together and say these things actually are impacting people's health, and we got to look at the systems that people are a part of.
I touch on this? Sure. I just wanted to touch from, as an athletic coach, I coach high school football, and I'm very involved in IEP meetings within school districts. So, there was a time where I came to an IEP meeting and I saw about 2 or 3 lawyers. I was in a certain district. And I looked, I said, wow. I said, man, this family gets it. I mean, they had lawyers at their IEP meetings. And there have been other cases where, I've been, with the family and they had no representation. It was just papers put in front of them, sign off on it. Didn't really understand what they were signing off on. So I did notice very quickly that, if you are in a very, very better financial situation or even a better educational situation, chances are you're going to hold people accountable that they do the right thing. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people who don't have that luxury. Being a football coach, I mean, we had kids who had to wait months to get physicals. I mean, these are kids who really, without football or sports, they could easily go downhill. They could easily fall off track. That's the one thing they may love. But I found out that their waiting times and some of their requirements to get a physical were much more severe than someone, who might come from a better situation. So I've seen that at some cases the system becomes very crowded, for the young person, who may have to get a prescription refilled, at the local clinic, they might not have their evaluation for 2 to 3 weeks down the line, which means the problems in school and the problems, in the community probably won't be addressed until that appointment. So I do think we need, to do a better job, maybe statewide or nationally, to address those who are on these long waiting lists, or to address those who have to suffer because they don't have the means.
Okay. Here's a question for everybody. How can we, the beloved community on the main line, help actualize justice and equal opportunity for all? Where should we focus our efforts, talents, privileges, and resources? Do we talk person to person, local, state, federal government? Where in your fields, where in your fields do you see, can you speak to what you would suggest as prioritizing the efforts?
I'm just going to say, I see how this begins because, like I said, we represent children who have been deemed abused and neglected. And I would just say, one, just being here is a wonderful first step, understanding, saying, I want to be involved. But if you ever want to be involved, go volunteer at some of these school districts that don't have the resources that they're talking about here. You will see how kids are, one, their behavior patterns, some of the things that they're dealing with, and you'll get an understanding of the life circumstances that surround what they, how they see themselves in the world. And I think that when you spend that time and give that attention, that is a prevention strategy that we can utilize so that these kids aren't funneled through our juvenile justice systems that perpetuates the feeling of less self or no self-worth. And then, of course, we see those kids that come through there as adults. There's a huge correlation between that. And I'm always about prevention. I definitely want to reduce my own caseloads. I definitely don't want to see as many young children come into this system committing crimes that are unimaginable and unthinkable, where I believe that we could have gotten to them. But I really think it starts at those schools. These teachers see a lot. Some of them feel like they can't do anything for them. But if people say, I will volunteer and I will create an opportunity for kids to be exposed to my world or my resources, I think that's a very good prevention model.
I'll just start out by saying the main line is in a very amazing position to help so many people. And as I mentioned, my childhood comes back to spending weekends, out here in the community. Just in my short career, I've seen an abundance of assistance come from places like Villanova. Habitat for Humanities, they had, a large Rock the Block program in Norristown where hundreds of college students partnered to help the community in Norristown. Cabrini University and the Wolfington Center, which is a local school, has done a lot of work in the Norristown community, working with our schools, our nonprofits. Eastern, Harcum, the colleges are huge. I've seen the colleges, really work to give back to more disadvantaged communities like Norristown. And I've participated and partnered with many of the folks from the main line. I would just say to continue to expose, not just Norristown, but expose the kids of Pottstown, expose the kids of areas of Philadelphia that don't have these opportunities, allow them to come to your campuses and tour, allow them to learn about, financial literacy and things that plague our communities. The exposure is the biggest thing you can think of, but I do know the colleges and universities have done a pretty good job of coming into, communities. Even as a councilman, I've worked with some young developers. I ask them, where'd you grow up? And tell me, I went to Haverford School. I grew up here out in this area. There are young developers as young as 30 years old looking to do really nice, good things in Norristown, whether it's build a restaurant, whether it's to help her downtown. And I've seen sincerity from some of those folks, because you do know that there's some people that come in, they just want to make money. But I do think there's some really positive roots from this region that spreads. And I'll just encourage you to continue it, to reach out and help others who don't have the fortunate, things that many of you do.
And I just would echo what has been said as far as, today is a great first step as far as you being here, and the concept of the community breakfast is just fantastic. Everyone coming together to really hear about some of these issues. I think a lot of times we know like the very surface of an issue, and we might have a gut feeling like that's wrong or that's right, or I want to advocate, but we don't necessarily, 2 questions in, we're not exactly sure what's going on, or we're not exactly sure what the real issues are or how people are experiencing these things. So educating yourself, taking that time to learn, well, what is really going on? What's the research say? Or what's really the background? What really does this policy say? What does this policy do? How does it differentially impact individuals? Asking those questions and educating yourself is the first step of knowing, okay, great, now I know I want to be involved with this, or now we can have colleges, universities, other organizations who are already doing this work, who are understaffed and don't have the resources, you can kind of contribute to what they're doing, and we can organize, I think, in more powerful ways than people are kind of feeling like I believe in this, but I don't really understand it. And so really taking that time to do that.
Okay, at this time, since our time is starting to run out, but I'm really happy that everybody has been engaged. So what I'm going to do at this time is to ask our panelists to basically give us a concluding statement, and maybe as part of that concluding statement that you would include a little information on if you had an opportunity to write another amendment. And you're, what might that amendment consist of? So you can start.
Great question. So I think one of the things that is big in the public health community, and certainly, like I began, I'm a big advocate for health equity, and so I think one of the things that we think about human rights in this great country, and while internationally we have been a part of writing a lot of international human rights documents, the United States has not signed on to a lot of them. And the reason being is because we would have to legislate some of those changes, and we haven't decided to do some of those things. And so I always say to help people really understand what health equity is, that we have to have a really strong, we have to move beyond just documenting health disparities and then move towards promoting a health equity agenda, that there will be a civil rights movement that actually is focused on promoting health equity. And so people say, well, what exactly do you mean? That sounds lovely, but what is health equity? I say we're all invited to a game, right? We're all invited to the game. We all want to have the same outcome, that's seeing the game. But there's a fence built around the perimeter. And so the fence is 6 feet tall. And so anyone who's over 6 feet tall, they get to see the game. Anyone else has access to the game, but they don't get to see the game. They don't get to have that same outcome of seeing the game, right? Because they have that fence, right? And so health equity doesn't mean say, okay, let's give everybody a block so that they can see the game, because the person that's 2 feet might not still be able to see the game with that block. So we have to see, well, this person is 6'5". They don't need any block. They're good where they are. This person is 5'5". Okay, we're going to give them a little block. This person over here is 2 feet. We need to give them several blocks so that they can all have the same outcome. So if we move to that outcomes-based agenda to say, okay, what do we need to get everybody to the same outcomes? And then let's begin to legislate some of those specific areas. We have a lot of research. We know a lot of things, but we haven't had the political will to actually legislate some of those things, to kind of say, okay, everybody, we are going to be committed to moving everybody to have that same experience.
Yes.
All right, I was consulting with my legal person over here. I would like to amend the, maybe the Sixth Amendment, right to, a fair trial or due process. There are a lot of communities where, people of color get pointed out and they get targeted, they get pulled over, they get stopped, their cars get searched. A lot of things, it's been happening nationwide, and it even happens close to home and in some of our communities. So that process going through court and seeing that, your zip code or your address or your last name, You know, you may have brothers or cousins who've been through the system, that it will affect you pretty greatly. You know, some communities are slapped with felonies as early as 13, 14 years of age, where other communities are given community service. You know, some folks are selling drugs on the corner, $5, $10 bags, and a small scale. And in other communities, you have people running full institutions out of colleges and schools and high schools. They're labeled as sub dealers and brain masterminds, while the other people are labeled as creeps and scum. So I just would like to see the court system, treat everybody equally, no matter what kind of money you come from, no matter what kind of checks you're writing for political campaigns. I just think people need the same opportunities, or we won't see any change. So the right to a fair trial is something that I would like to change.
Man, I have nothing else to talk about now. Yeah.
I would like for you to add, and I do want to add this question because I think it's important because we have students in the audience, but it says, what opportunities do you have for high school, college level students to explore your field, get involved, and find their path toward the success of the future? Who do they contact specifically?
Well, that's a good question. The Montgomery County Public Defender's Office does accept college students, I believe, and they do some internships there where you learn about the process. The Philadelphia Defender Association also accepts college students. It's hard for high school because it's very sensitive information, so we definitely want to keep it at the college level. So if you want to get involved, we do a lot of community resource resource fairs. This Saturday, we're doing an expungement clinic in Philadelphia. If you go to the Defender Association of Philadelphia's page, you'll see all of our community action items. We need volunteers all the time, and especially with our expungement clinics and some of the other things that we do. So just, look for our information. We post it on our social media platforms, and please come and join us. But I want to answer the last question about an amendment that I would make, and it really ties on what both of them said. I think I would like to make an amendment, if I had a magic wand, that no state shall prioritize punitive measures in their budget over education and public health. So done, right? So, if your prison budget is taking up most of your tax dollars, then I think that they should have to re-examine that and find ways to put that money into education and the healthcare system, because our tax dollars are supposed to work for the better of us, not for certain areas of our society. So that would be my amendment.
All right, and then just very quickly, Candace, about the question, opportunities for high school, college level students to explore your field.
Certainly, there's lots of different opportunities. I think public health is everywhere, like I mentioned. So depending on what aspect of it you're interested in, even at the high school level, you can get involved. You can, volunteer, and definitely, can come if anyone specifically is interested. I can give you my card. I've worked with high school students, middle school students. There's health education fairs, working with agencies, lots of different ways. Learning, educating yourself. Social media is a great tool now. We've had a program to engage young people in advocating and promoting health through social media. So that's a great campaign and great way to get involved, learn about issues, but contribute as well.
I will also have business cards that I will have available for young people in school looking to learn more about public service or how to get involved. There are tons of events happening throughout Montgomery County, not just in Norristown, but a lot of us, we do get constant invites to different things. I'll be willing to connect any students in the room to opportunities for community service, opportunities to learn about the experience of being an elected official. I'll leave some cards out. Also, I'm an athletic coach. I coach high school football, and I'm involved with youth football. If you're interested in starting a nonprofit, I've been fortunate enough to be a part of 3 that were recently launched in the last 5 years. Those are things that I'd be glad to sit down and talk to you young people about.
I think we've had a great discussion. And unfortunately, our time is just about out. The questions that I had that were not answered, I will make sure we will get answers from our panelists, and we'll put them on Facebook, so you should be able to get those responses. And clearly, we need to continue the conversation because there's a lot of information, and with their expertise, we can certainly begin to really, really impact the areas that we would like to. I just want to conclude with the NAACP since 1909 nationally, on the main line since 1930, has been extremely active in advocating for civil rights across the board, to ensure the political, educational, social, and economic equality of rights of all persons, and to eliminate race-based discrimination. So if you want to become a member, I will be happy to take your membership. Adult membership is $30. Our young people, you can join for $10. And we just want to keep the conversation, but more than that, we want to begin to take action that will really impact change and have us result as Dr. Martin Luther King envisioned the beloved community. Thank you.
Just understanding in my office and our work. I would love you to come talk to be on the panel at our office.
Let's give our panelists and Diana Robertson, our moderator, one more hand of applause. I learned a lot. A couple of remarks before we have the closing prayer. I have to recognize that when Candace was talking about the game and the wall and helping people to be able to see over that wall so that everyone can see the game, in theological terms, that's called subsidiarity. And St. Augustine, who is the founder of the Augustinian order and the Villanova University, subsidiarity in Augustine's words is giving to each according to their need. So the 6-foot person can see over, and the other two need additional numbers of blocks. So it's actually extraordinarily Augustinian, that concept. So I thought, so I was cheering. Just have a couple of things to say. Commissioner Elaine Schaefer, could you please stand? Oh, I just missed her. Well, she's been my commissioner for many years and president of the commissioners up until recently, and this is her last amount of time serving. So I wanted to recognize her support to the community breakfast, so I hope I'll pass it along. At your tables, there are evaluation forms, and we would really appreciate your feedback. So if you could fill out the evaluation forms before you leave, and then also bring your evaluation forms to the door as you're leaving. They will be collected by Juanita, and Barbara is collecting the pens. So if you could bring the pens to the door. And then also, please take your programs with you. It includes information from today's program and also the date of next year's community breakfast, which is September 19th, 2018. So that's in there as well. So if you could help to tidy up the tables and let us get your feedback on the program for this year. And in addition, on the way out the door, Susan Underwood and Deputy Chris Flanagan will be handing out pocket-sized copies of the Constitution for you to take with you. These were provided by the League of Women Voters. And so each of you will have a pocket-sized copy of the Constitution to take with you. One more note, tomorrow is the United Nations International Day of Peace. And so we're sandwiched in very nicely between Constitution Day, which was Monday, and then the International Day of Peace, which is tomorrow. In the Catholic Church, we celebrate the International, or the Day of Peace, on January 1st. So I have the prayer for peace in our communities to share with you, and that is from January 1st. Let us pray. Good and gracious God, in your mercy and kindness, no thought of ours is left unnoticed, no desire or concern ignored. You have proven that blessings abound when we fall on our knees in prayer, and so we turn to you in our hour of need. Surrounded by violence and cries for justice, we hear your voice telling us what is required, only to do justice and to love goodness and to walk humbly with your God. Fill us with your mercy so that we in turn may be merciful to others. Strip away pride, suspicion, and racism so that we may seek peace and justice in our communities. Strengthen our hearts so that they beat only to the rhythm of your holy will. Flood our path with your light as we walk humbly toward a future filled with encounter and unity. Be with us, O God, in our efforts, for only by the prompting of your grace can we progress toward virtue. We ask this through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all for coming. We look forward to having all your feedback so we can improve things for next year. And thank you for dreaming your stories and telling your stories. Thank you very much.
I can see you as a principal.
Yeah, I can do that.
I can totally.
I think on the